Mike Brown, the former FEMA director.
Joining us here is the former FEMA director.
History, I think, was very unkind to you, my friend. Very unkind.
Mr. Brown, thanks for being with us.
This is Michael Brown Unplugged.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of Michael Brown Unplugged. I'm going to do something a little differently today. I want to start out. Normally, I save the taxpayer relief shots for the end of the podcast or the end of the radio program. But today, I want to start out with a couple of taxpayer shots. The first one comes to us from Rockdale County, Georgia. And the reason this one intrigues me is, well, there are a couple of reasons. But in general, let's just say that 3 masked and armed teenagers, ages 15 and 16. So they're not old enough to go into a gun store and buy a gun. Got it? They invade the home of a man who lived there with his mother. The man is armed with a semi-automatic rifle. He is able to shoot all 3 of them. One of the teenagers dies in the house. The other 2 are found by the side of the road with their guns, and they wind up DOA, dead on arrival, at the local hospital. Now, the reason I am particularly intrigued, this particular taxpayer relief shot, is because of an interview done by WBC out of, I assume out of Atlanta, Georgia. This occurred in Rockdale County, Georgia, at 4 o'clock in the morning. Now, I want you to imagine you're in your home. It's 4 o'clock. I don't know whether you have a 1-story ranch house, whether you have a 2-story, 3-story. It doesn't make any difference. It's 4 a.m. Unless you are an insomniac or an incredibly light sleeper, at 4 o'clock in the morning, most people, or unless you're going to work, most people are in a deep REM sleep. You go into that REM sleep most often before you wake up. You're in this deep REM sleep. You hear the crash of a window or a door, whatever. 3 thugs. Now, I don't care that these 3 thugs happen to be 15 and 16 years old. They're armed. Every single one of them with a gun. So let's go to the news story and work our way through it.
Yeah, my ears was ringing. That first shot had my ears ringing.
Asteria Williams told us she hit her bedroom floor when she heard gunshots just feet from her window overnight.
My room is right here. I'm right here by it.
Rockdale County Sheriff's deputies spent hours Monday collecting evidence on White Oak Court after a man who lives in this home shot and killed 3 masked teenagers he confronted on the front lawn.
3 masked teenagers. I think you can safely assume, and you can properly assume, that if you are confronted by 3 masked men, teenagers, you don't know how old they are. They're wearing masks. It doesn't make any difference how big, small, wide, narrow. It doesn't make any difference what size they are. They're masked, and they're on your front yard.
Dude, he's a nice, caring dude. If they would have knocked on the door and asked him for anything, he would have gave it to them. He's a nice dude.
Earlier, while investigators worked the scene,
he didn't have to kill them.
Frustration from this group, who wouldn't give their names, but told my colleague Sophia Choi they're related to one of the teens who died.
That's not how it's supposed to go.
That's not how it's supposed to go. Well, how's it supposed to go when you show up in my yard at 4 o'clock in the morning wearing masks and carrying guns? These are the stupid times that we live in. Now, the kid that you just heard say, this is not how it's supposed to go, looks himself to be maybe 15, 16, maybe 18, wearing a hoodie, tattooed, and sitting there telling the reporters, this isn't how it's supposed to go. In fact,
I understand one shot to stop the people, the victims or whatever, but aggressively to shoot these little teens.
I understand shooting one time to stop. This kid knows 0 about firearms. He knows 0 about the lethality of one shot. Think about that. How many times have we watched where a cop or a number of cops have been involved in a legitimate law enforcement involved shooting. They fire a couple of rounds, and the suspect, continues to charge or continues to get up, continues to move, even after having been shot one or two times. Then, of course, the coup de grace for me in the interview of this kid is when he says,
to stop the people, the victims or whatever.
To stop the people, the victims. This is bizarro world. He thinks the victims are the perpetrators. Oh, it gets better, because then he says,
aggressively to shoot these little teens.
To aggressively shoot these little teens. Oh, he's right. The more I think about it, it's just three juveniles, 15, 16, and 16. That's not how it's supposed to go. That's just too much to handle. That's overkill.
That's an overkill. That's too much to handle.
Neighbor Carlos Watson told us the gunfire woke him up. Then a small army of deputies flooded the cul-de-sac within minutes.
Chaos. I moved here from Chicago, so it kind of put me back to a mindset. I didn't know what was happening initially, and I just wanted to make sure everybody was okay.
And while investigators work to understand exactly what led to the shooting, for Asteria Williams,
It's sad. You shouldn't risk your life for nothing like that, because you can't.
At least she's got it right. You shouldn't risk your life for nothing like that. We got one sane person in this news story. It's her, the neighbor, who was awakened from her deep sleep by the sound of gunshots just outside her bedroom window. Yeah, you shouldn't be risking your life for nothing like that. And there's today's taxpayer relief shot, an absolute classic. And I say it's a classic for a couple of reasons. One is it appears from all the other stories that I've read that it appears to be a legitimate shooting by the victim, the homeowner. But it also is a great example of how all of these proposals being advocated by people like Robert Francis O'Rourke or Kamala Harris or any of the other doofuses on that Democrat debate stage that want to impose universal background checks. And by universal background checks, they mean they want anybody that's involved in the private transaction of a sale of a gun from one person to another, that you must go to an FFL, either a private FFL that is willing to do the background check in the transaction, or to a gun store where there are FFLs, Federal Firearm License Dealers, and so that they can conduct the background check. So in Georgia, you cannot legally purchase a gun under the age of 18. And yet here we have three juveniles, two age 16, one age 15, all in possession of guns. Do you think they went through a background check? Better yet, let's rephrase the question. Do you think that if the Democrats got their way and we had universal background checks so that any private transaction of a firearm from one individual to another, do you think these three goobers would have done that? Of course they wouldn't. Now, we don't know. Did they steal the guns? Did they buy the guns off some, gun dealer in a back alley somewhere? I don't know. I don't care. Because the point is, they obtained their weapons, however they obtained them. They obtained them illegally and used those illegally obtained weapons in a crime that but for the fact that they picked the wrong house, we'd probably have dead people inside the house instead of 3 dead teenagers who would not, under any circumstances, have been able to obtain those guns legally. You will always, if you prohibit something, this is one of the maxims of life that if you understand the history of National Review, you'll understand this. One of the maxims of life is that if you ban something or if you prohibit something, there will always be a black market. So all of these proposals for universal background checks to do this or to do that is only aimed at and in fact, I think there are several purposes. One, it's to motivate the liberal Marxist base. Oh, yeah, we want gun control. We want gun control. We want universal background checks. We want all these things. But I think it actually goes deeper than that. I truly believe, and every time that one of these doofuses on that debate stage tells me that, I go skeet shooting or I go hunting or I like to target practice or anything else, screw it. The but is you want somehow to disarm the American public. There's a great meme going around that talks about, we don't seem to be able to find and deport the 10 million or the 15 million or the 30 million, whatever the number is, of illegal aliens that are in the United States. We are told by the Marxist left that it is impossible to do that. Yet somehow they want us to believe that it is possible to confiscate 100 million guns that are in the hands of private ownership in this country. You can't find those 10 million, but by golly, you'll be able to find the 100 million, which I challenge the logic, but two, I used to have about 40 or 50 guns, and I think now I'm down to about 2. Yeah, I don't know where the others went. Try and confiscate them. And then the last point I would make about what I think is really behind this. I truly and sincerely believe that these candidates are the useful idiots of the Democrat Party. Now, so are their supporters, but they are the useful idiots because while they truly may not want, they probably really do want to confiscate guns, but they probably really don't believe that if we disarm American citizens, I don't think they ever believe that the government would ever become tyrannical and that we would ever need to oppose our government with force. I think they really believe that. And you know why? Because they believe not in the supremacy of the individual. They believe in the supremacy of the state. And anybody who believes in the supremacy of the state, listen closely, anyone who believes in the supremacy of the state is anti-freedom, anti-liberty, and is a danger to this republic. I'll be right back. You have probably heard by now, because it's all over the news, that Manhattan District Attorney Cyrus Vance Jr.'s office last month issued a subpoena seeking several years of tax records on Donald Trump and the Trump Organization. Mazars USA, which is the accounting firm that's represented both Trump and the Trump Organization, told news organizations that, quote, we have received a subpoena, but she would not give any specifics about it. I believe that the district attorney, tax records are subject to being subpoenaed. That's just a matter of law. But I think in this case, we have to recognize that the issuance of the subpoenas for the president, now it's one thing if you want to investigate the Trump Organization. I can argue that you're politicizing it. I can argue that it's politically motivated. I can argue that it's just one other attempt to start a war against the president on another flank. In this case, through his business organization, the Trump Organization. I still think it's politicizing it. But the real thing that bothers me about it is the request for his personal tax returns. Let's just pretend for a moment, for the sake of argument, that the Manhattan District Attorney has a legitimate criminal reason to be investigating the personal tax returns of the President of the United States, Donald Trump. She can conduct that investigation. She cannot, however, well, I suppose she could indict the president, but the president cannot be tried on that indictment while he is in office. But the other thing that fascinates me about this is where I think both the brilliance of Donald Trump and the utter stupidity or blindness. They are blinded by the Trump derangement syndrome. This is going to come back and bite them in the ass. Because if we reach, and I don't look, I do not want the president indicted while he's in office. Quite frankly, I'm sick of these investigations. And just to be as objective as possible, I will say that I find it as plausible as I do implausible that the Trump organization or the president may have committed a financial crime somewhere, somehow, in his decades of business. Now, why do I say that? I say that because I believe that no, I'm not talking to you, I'm talking to you. You can look over your shoulder all you want to. Pay attention, I'm talking to you. If the Manhattan District Attorney, if you're listening or live in Manhattan, or if you live in Douglas County, Colorado, or you live in Colfax County, New Mexico, or you live in Hayes County, Kansas, I don't care where you live, wherever you are right now. If an overzealous prosecutor decides to start digging through every single aspect of your life, I think there's a better than 99% chance that they will find some obscure either federal, state, or local regulation that you have violated, or some federal, state, or local statute or ordinance that you have violated, because everyone in America is a criminal. All it takes is a zealous prosecutor to dig long and hard enough to find something, because we have completely destroyed the concept of criminal law and criminal jurisprudence in this country. It used to be that you had to have the intent to commit a crime. For example, we've now made a lot of things that are environmental regulations that if you violate that, even unknowingly or unwittingly violate an environmental regulation, you can be held criminally liable for it. We have destroyed the concept of mens rea, meaning that you must have that knowledge of that mindset that you are committing a crime. We've destroyed that. So there's no doubt in my mind that the Manhattan prosecutor, if they wanted to dig long, hard, and deep enough, could find something somewhere to indict either the Trump organization, its officers and directors, or its founder and former chairman of the board, Donald John Trump. They could find something to indict them on. But the reason this bugs me is, I would say the same thing if it was Bill Clinton or Barack Obama. And you know why? Because we are politicizing our political differences. If you stop back, if you just had not lived for the past since November of let's go back even further. Let's go back to the beginning of the 2016 campaign. Let's go back to 2015. If you were not alive in 2015, or you were on another planet, and you landed today on September 18, and all you did was study what they have done with this president since he first went down that, I should pull up Joe Biden here and say, was it an escalator? Were they stairs? What do you call those things? Anyway, Biden couldn't remember the word escalator. When Trump came down the escalator at Trump Tower, and you watched everything subsequent to that moment, you would say, holy crap, Batman. They have been attacking this president, not politically, but legally on every aspect of his life. They're trying to find anything legally that will reach the level of impeachment. They're now trying in Manhattan to try to find anything in terms of financial crimes. They're going after this president on every avenue, in every aspect of his life, legally trying to bring him down. You know, here's my fear. We're setting a new, I would say standard, but I would say actually it's a new low. What we're doing now is we're politicizing the political process. And because an election didn't turn out the way that most people expected it to turn out, especially Democrats, well, let's do everything in our power to bring down this presidency. And even if we can't bring him down in this first term, let's do every single thing that we can to destroy his ability or to diminish or mitigate against his ability to get reelected. And let's do that with legal process maneuvering into every aspect of his life. The danger in that, Republicans will do the same thing. Now, I'm opposed to that. I don't think Democrats should be doing it, and I don't think Republicans should be doing it. And I might even make the argument that I don't think that a lot of Republicans have the stomach for doing it. But I think there are some Republicans who will look back on the last 4 years, or if he gets reelected, the last 8 years, and if a Democrat replaces Donald Trump in 2024, it will be all hands on deck, balls to the wall, do everything we can to bring down that new Democrat president from a legal standpoint instead of a political standpoint. The other danger in all of this is that it turns off the American public. You know, I've often said on the radio and podcasts and speeches everywhere that when the founders talked about a republic, they knew that the citizenry had to be informed. They had to understand how their government works. They had to understand the structure of the government. They had to understand how our politics works, because an informed citizenry cannot be fooled by the shenanigans of one party or another who wants to politicize, through the legal process, political differences. Political differences are just that. Political differences should simply be nothing more than difference of opinion on public policy. Now, of course, it's getting worse in 2019 because we see how far left the Democrats have gone. And we know that if we go down that path, if Democrats were to actually gain power such that they had control of the executive branch and the legislative branch, the only stopgap that we have against turning this country from a democratic or constitutional republic into a democratic socialist country or just a pure socialist country will be the U.S. Supreme Court, which would force the hands, I think, of Republicans to play the same game that the Democrats are playing today. And I don't think that's good for the country. I want to have the debate about the Democrats' policies. I want to have the debate about Republican policies. I want to have a debate about the direction this country should go. What should be the policies that we live under? But we're not doing that. We're having a courtroom battle. We're having a courtroom battle, whether it's the continued battle against Donald Trump in every legal aspect of his life, whether it's trying to go after Brett Kavanaugh in every aspect of his college life. Good grief. We're crazy. We're committing political suicide. Both parties are. We're simply politicizing everything to the point that that group of people, the average Joes out there, the average Sallys out there, that just want to live their lives, make a decent living, have some job security, raise their children, retire easily, they're getting drawn into this vortex of legalisms that just causes them, naturally so, to get turned off and to turn away from the political system. And when that happens, who's left to battle the political issues? The extremes. The extremes on the left and the right. And you may be laughing right now because you're thinking to yourself, oh, but Michael, you're an extremist. You're an extremist on the right. You know, actually what I am? I'm an extremist for liberty and freedom. I'm an extremist for the Constitution and the plain meaning of the language. I'm an extremist for the supremacy of the individual over the collective. So if that makes me a right-wing nut job, then I'm a right-wing nut job. I eschew that label, and I think that label's incorrect, because if I ever have a chance to explain, well, I'm not sure I could get through to some of the useful idiots on the left, but there's got to be somebody somewhere who understands what's happening to the country. You know, everybody bemoans the loss of the middle class. Do you know what else we're losing? We're losing middle America. Now, middle America, I believe, is gravitating toward Trump because they see Trump right now as the underdog. And Americans like the underdog. They also like somebody who stands up to the bully. Trump standing up to the bully, whether that be House Democrats, Democrat candidates, or the mainstream media, which has become an arm of the Democrat Party, or of the cable news media, which is likewise an arm of the Democrat Party. So they're kind of forcing those who are politically active or politically astute or trying to stay politically aware. I think they're forcing that great middle over to Donald Trump. And you know what? I'm fine with that. But in the grand scheme of things, instead of looking at things at a real kind of microcosm level, I'd rather look at the big scheme of things of where this country's going generally. And when I look at all the microcosms, the legal battles, the politicization of differences of public policy, the absolute Trump derangement syndrome, I think back to the 8 years of Barack Obama. And I remember saying this. Some of you may have heard me say it. If you didn't, you'll get to hear it for the first time. While he was president, I despised with every fiber of my being every time that man spoke or he stood up in a joint session of Congress or a State of the Union or a speech somewhere that got televised or a press conference, because I knew in his heart of hearts, having skimmed through, I didn't read word for word his 2 autobiographies, but I did read through them, skim through them. I understood where he came from. I understand that he is at his heart a Marxist. I get that. And so I opposed his policies with every fiber of my being. But I didn't hate him. I couldn't hate him. I despised everything that he stood for. But Barack Obama, the human being, I couldn't hate him. I couldn't hate him for one thing because I don't know him. It's hard to hate somebody that you've never actually met. I know it's easy to despise somebody because of what you read or hear, because I've been on that end of the spear. But I wanted to beat Obama not as an individual. I wanted to beat what he stood for. And I think that's a very significant distinction. Most people today won't get that distinction, but I hope if you think about it, you'll understand it. Hang on, I'll be right back. Finally, I want to play for you. I want to do a flashback to Joe Biden, 1987. I know that's ancient history. But before I get to the Joe Biden soundbite, which I think you'll absolutely love, I want to remind you to do 2 things for me. Please subscribe to this podcast, Michael Brown Unplugged, on the iHeart app or on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. But I would also ask you a great big favor, and that is to start subscribing to the radio podcast, which you can also find on iHeart or iTunes or wherever podcasts are available. If you just search for Michael Brown, you should get both Michael Brown Unplugged, which is this podcast, and Michael Brown's Heck of a Show, which is the iHeartRadio show heard Monday through Friday on 630 KHAL from 2 to 4 p.m. Mountain Time. But you can get both of them, and I just want to remind everybody to to subscribe to it, get those podcasts, never miss a minute of Michael Brown, right? And then finally, sure, if you want to follow me on social media, simply go to michaelbrowntoday.com, and there you'll find across the bottom of the homepage all of the social media icons. So you can follow me on YouTube, subscribe there, click the bell to be sure and get notifications. You can subscribe on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all LinkedIn, all of those. And then just as a reminder, if you want to contact me about either this podcast or the radio program, the email is back up and running, michaelbrown@iheartmedia.com. michaelbrown@iheartmedia.com. So now to our flashback. 1987, Joe Biden's first presidential campaign. Now, we have laughed about the gaffes that Joe Biden has made over the years. But there's a huge difference between the gaffes of 1987 and the gaffes that occur in 2019. What do you think that difference is? It's the media. The media in 1987 was willing to go after Joe Biden, then Senator Joe Biden, for his gaffes. In 2019, oh, that's just Joe. Yeah, Joe's a lot older and seems to be a lot more senile. Take a listen.
Biden today faces a controversy. 3 weeks ago at a debate at the Iowa State Fair, he used phrases identical to those delivered by British Labour Party leader Neil Kinnock.
Biden seemed to be claiming Kinnock's vision and life as his own.
Why is it that my wife, who's sitting out there in the audience, is the first in her family to ever go to college?
Why is Gladys the first woman in her family in 1,000 generations to be able to get to university?
My ancestors who worked in the coal mines in northeast Pennsylvania don't come up after 12 hours and play football.
8 hours underground and then come up and play football.
It's because they didn't have a platform upon which to stand.
There was no platform upon which they could stand.
The notion that every thought or notion or idea you'd have to go back and find and attribute to someone, I think is, quite frankly, ludicrous.
The problem here is that Senator Biden told his audience he'd just been thinking about these things, and he failed to give any credit at all to his famous British speechwriter.
You know, I was thinking on the way over here. Now, that's a little too much, because, as you point out, what's behind the words? What's there? And a lot of people, the rap on Biden has always been that it's just a surface.
I should have said, to paraphrase Neil Kinnock, it's the only time I didn't, and all the times I've ever used it.
But CBS News found a tape of a second instance.
It reappeared in the New York Times with a new charge, that Biden had appropriated a famous litany from the late Robert Kennedy about what the gross national product cannot measure.
It cannot measure the health of our children.
The health of our children.
The quality of our education.
The quality of their education.
The joy of their play.
Or the joy of their play.
Biden gave Kennedy no credit. He has also quoted or paraphrased John Kennedy, Hubert Humphrey, and British Labour Party leader Neil Kinnock, all without credit.
Joseph Biden admitted today that he committed plagiarism when he was in law school. He said it was a mistake, but that it was unintentional.
He quoted 5 pages of someone else's work without proper citation.
I've done some dumb things, and I'll do dumb things again.
He was given an F.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I've been dumb.
To the political community in Washington, it all seems of a piece. Plagiarism at law school, plagiarism on the stump.
The great communicator. Strike that. The great imitator.
You don't steal verbatim, or when you do, as he did 99% of the time, you give credit.
Biden's critics say he sells himself as a man whose words and visions can inspire a new generation in politics. But if the thoughts, phrases, and visions really belong to others, it's a form of false advertising.
Is it a wise idea, though, to take something that personal, anyway, from another politician and try and appropriate it to your own campaign?
I think it was a stupid thing to appropriate material that was really very personal, that was someone else's.
Most people didn't know who he was, you know, Joe Biden, and now they're going to say, oh, yeah, he's the guy who plagiarized. That's
a lot of people.
Politically, that's devastating.
These clips are devastating. He looks like a Joe Biden wind-up doll with somebody else's words coming out.
If they're going to do things that are stupid as well as immoral, then they're probably too dumb to have the job of president.
Voters are going to have to decide whether he was dishonest or dumb.
Senator Joseph Biden may have more explaining to do.
The new questions stem from taped remarks of Biden during an April campaign appearance in New Hampshire.
I went to law school on a full academic scholarship, the only one in my class to have a full academic scholarship. Went back to law school and, in fact, ended up in the top half of my class. I was the outstanding student in the political science department at the end of my year. I graduated with 3 degrees from undergraduate school and 165 credits, only needed 123 credits.
Biden now concedes he did not graduate in the top half of his law school class, that he does not have 3 degrees from college, and that he was not named outstanding political science student in college.
Newsweek says Biden actually went to school on a half scholarship, ended up near the bottom of his class, and won only 1 degree, not 3.
Joe Biden ranked 76th in a class of 85 at the University of Syracuse Law School. I mean, this guy comes off this whole thing as a flyweight.
Now Biden says Newsweek is right. His memory had failed him.
And I'd be delighted to sit down and compare my IQ to yours if you'd like, Frank.
Joe Biden was victimized by the truth.
Bye-bye Biden. He may not know it yet, but I think this is going to be very difficult for him to recover.
Is Joe Biden dead meat, yes or no?
I think so.
Well, what's the difference? That was 1987. The media was actually doing their job. It's 2019. Joe's older, maybe a little more senile, but they really need somebody to beat Trump. So all of that, that's ancient history. I'll talk to you tomorrow.